Good afternoon and welcome to CCK's Facebook Live. Today we're going to be talking about the VA disability claims and appeal process timeline, briefly touching on the old legacy system and mainly diving into the time frame for the new AMA system. Today I'm joined by my colleagues Kayla D'Onofrio and Mike Lustrito, and we will be going through the information we have to date, again, about the VA disability claims timeline and appeals process. However, please note that things are rapidly changing for a couple reasons. First and foremost, we are all still in the throes of the pandemic that is COVID-19, and this has caused a delay in a number of areas, as I'm sure you all can imagine, from scheduling VA exams just to personnel working from home or working in reduced rates. So the numbers we provide today might shift rapidly. And number two, the information that we have is for fiscal year 2019. So as we're about halfway through fiscal year 2020, we'll find out what the numbers are going forward. But the numbers we have right now really are for the last fiscal year. But with that, just note that as we can, we will pop up some infographics so you can follow along with us to understand, what we're talking about in terms of the claim stream. But please feel free to post questions in the comments or send a message to us on Facebook, comments in YouTube, and we will try to get back to you just best we can. So with that, let's dive in. Okay, so as of April 2020, so as of a few months ago, initial claims that were filed with VA were being decided on average in about 105.9 days. Gotta love that 0.9th of a day. But that's pretty quick comparatively to what things used to be. So Mike, briefly, what was the old legacy system and why are we no longer using it for new claims?
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, the legacy system was the prior system that VA used to adjudicate claims for benefits, VA benefits. And so this dealt with really the procedural steps or hurdles that a veteran would have to go through when filing a claim. It didn't deal so much with the substantive law, but it dealt with the procedural steps that a veteran would have to go through when filing a claim and appealing a denial. That system is being slowly phased out. And so for new claims that are filed and any decision that's issued on or after February 19th, 2019, which is, decisions that are now being issued, those decisions and those claims will be adjudicated in the new appeal system. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit later, the Appeals Modernization Act. That's that's a piece of legislation that was passed by Congress and signed by the president. And that now governs the appellate process for claims for benefits within the Department of Veterans Affairs. Again, I just want to emphasize that deals with the procedural aspect of deciding a claim, not necessarily the substantive law. Much of the substance of VA law has stayed the same.
So under that legacy system, and we're going to post up a graphic for you, as you can see, it's sort of a straight up and down line. A veteran would file their initial claim, they'd get a rating decision, and then they'd have to file that notice of disagreement if they didn't agree with either VA's decision to deny them benefits or they didn't agree with the rating they were assigned. They want more benefits. So Mike, what are some numbers that we know in terms of how long that process would take for a veteran to appeal that initial rating decision?
Sure. So like you said, once a veteran receives a rating decision, they then have 1 year from the date that the rating decision is issued to file a legacy notice of disagreement. Once that notice of disagreement is filed, what VA is required to do is issue a statement of the case, or an SOC as it's known. From data and information we've been able to obtain as of the fiscal year 2019, it has been taking VA, or it took VA, approximately 491 days to then issue a statement of the case in response to the veteran filing a notice of disagreement. And so at this stage of the process, that is the length it's taking VA to act and take the next step as part of the appellate process. The veteran has filed the notice of disagreement, and therefore VA then has the obligation to file a statement of the case.
So under the legacy system, That claim was just sitting with VBA for over a year. And the veterans disagreed with it. Nothing's really happening other than we're waiting for this SOC. And then the next step in the process is to say, I really do want to appeal. I wasn't kidding the first time around. Here's my VA Form 9. Was it still taking a long time for veterans to file those, or what was the average time for a veteran to file a VA 9 once they got that SOC?
So based on the data, on average, it was taking veterans approximately 37 days to, as you said, say, yes, I want to continue appealing this denial. I'm filing this VA Form 9 or substantive appeal, as it was known. Veterans typically, generally speaking, had 60 days, to file the Form VA 9 from the date that the statement of the case was issued. But like I said, the data suggests that veterans were doing so much sooner than that, within typically 37 days of receiving that statement of the case.
So then the next part, and Mike, I'm sure you can explain this a little more detail, got a little wonky. So you file the VA 9, and then it seems like a couple more things need to happen in the process for your appeal to actually get to the board under the legacy system. So can you talk us through that and sort of where the delays come in?
Sure. And this really, much of the delay comes in at this stage when a veteran's seeking further appeal at the Board of Veterans' Appeals. So up until now, we've said that the veteran will have filed a Form 9, a VA 9, in response to the statement of the case. But then at that point, the case has to be transferred from the regional office to the board. And in order to do so, the regional office needs to what's called certify the appeal to the board. And that on average was taking approximately 246 days. And this is, a significant delay. And it's unfortunate because at this stage of the game, the onus really is on VA to take that next step and certify the case to the board. Veterans are kind of in a holding pattern waiting for VA to act. So once after, the time has come that VA has issued the certification letter and the veteran's appeal has moved from the local regional office to the board, the next step then is again on VA. And at that point, once the board is in receipt of the certification, they have to docket the appeal. And docketing typically, according to our data, was taking on average of 340 additional days for that to happen. Again, a significant delay, almost another year on average for that to happen. The appeal or the claim is still within VA's jurisdiction at that point, or it's with the board at that point. So again, the veteran doesn't need to do anything. They're just waiting for VA to take that next step. At that point, the board, once it makes a decision, it can do one of three things, generally speaking. It can grant the issue, it can deny the issue, or it can remand the issue. With remands, as many of us know, the claim is, or the issue hasn't been finally decided. And so the case then goes back to the regional office for further adjudication, maybe further development. And again, from the data that we've seen, remands are taking, or were taking, as of fiscal year 2019, approximately 519 additional days to be decided and to be worked. And so, as you can tell from these timeframes, this is a significant delay and a significantly long process that veterans have to endure in order to have their case heard and adjudicated. All told, when you take a look at the numbers, on average, this takes a little over 5 years for a case to be decided if it goes to the board. And so, that is very significant, and it can be very frustrating because, as we've discussed, much of the onus is on VA to act and to take the next step in the appeal process. Veterans, when their action is required, we've seen that they do so fairly quickly by filing the necessary Form 9 and the Notice of Disagreement. So it's a system that was causing significant delay. And I think one important thing to note is that these numbers are based on fiscal year 2019, as we discussed. And what we're seeing now in 2020 is that actually VA is working these cases, these legacy cases, much faster than they have in the past. And we'll probably get into a little bit as to why that is later in our discussion. But some of these numbers, it'll be interesting to see whether some of these numbers are in fact still what they were reported to be in 2019.
And that's an interesting point, and a good point to note is that if you have a legacy case that's still out there in the appeals process, we in our practice have been seeing these go extremely fast. So whereas it used to take a couple of years to get an SOC issued, now we're seeing them issued within a month of that NOD. So that's something just to keep in mind. Reach out to your VSO, your accredited rep, your attorney, whoever you're working with on your claim, to make sure that you are keeping an eyeball on your appeal deadlines and not missing anything, because VA is moving a lot faster than they used to. So looking back, the wait times were increasing. The wait times went up for we have numbers saying about 300 days from 2017 to 2019, leading up to the implementation of the Appeals Modernization Act. But now it seems like those numbers might be going down. So we'll get back to you with an update once we have more information. All right, well, that kind of leads us to the backlog that everyone is probably familiar with, the wait and delay with getting an appeal decided. So Kayla, tell us a little bit about the new system, the AMA, and why it was created.
Yeah, so like Mike said, AMA went into effect in February of 2019, and it was really a way for VA to sort of allow veterans to have, or claimants to have, more choice and control, as they like to say, over their claims process. So you can see in the infographic that it's no longer just sort of that straightforward, one appeal option for any kind of decision that you receive. For any decision you receive, you now have a number of different options, as well as, different sorts of options for who's looking at your appeal, what you're submitting, how you're submitting it. So it's supposed to allow veterans and claimants to have a little bit more control over, who's deciding their claims and what they're submitting and at what times. It's also, in theory, supposed to be a way to, take back some of the backlog and cut down on some of those wait times, because we're not seeing things just sitting in one part of the process. Things are a little bit more spread out evenly across the board in all of these different review options. So in theory, it should also help to cut down on some of that wait time as we, kind of get through those appeals and see the decisions coming in.
So for a claim that gets decided, what is VA's goal in terms of getting these cases decided, getting rating decisions issued in the new system?
Good question. So right now, VA's goal for decisions at the regional office level is about 125 days. So there's a couple of different sort of decisions that we see at the regional office level. So you can file an initial claim and you'll get an initial decision off of that claim. And then from there, you have several different appeal options. So you have the supplemental claim option, the higher level review option, and the board notice of disagreement option. So at the regional office, the first one is the supplemental claim that we'll talk about today. For a supplemental claim, this is the option that you have where you can submit new evidence, and VA is supposed to look at that as a sort of new reopening of your claim. So if you're within a year of that rating decision, you can file the supplemental claim with what VA calls new and relevant evidence. So something that wasn't previously part of your record and sort of helps to support your claim. It is supposed to be a lesser standard than the new and material evidence that we were seeing in the legacy appeals process, although we haven't necessarily seen that in practice. It is supposed to be sort of a lower burden to overcome. And one thing to keep in mind with the supplemental claim option is that VA does still have to abide by their duty to assist, meaning that they do still have an obligation to help veterans and claimants obtain any additional evidence that they think is necessary for their claim. So obtaining additional medical records or maybe VA exams. So there is a little bit more work on VA's part that will go into deciding these claims. So I think for that reason, we do sometimes see a little bit more wait time between when the appeal is filed and when we see the decision, because there is a little bit more involved on VA's end as far as obtaining additional evidence for these sorts of appeals.
And then you mentioned another choice at the regional office level is to pick the higher level review. Tell us a little bit about that process. I think that's on the left side of our infographic.
So for higher level review, this lane is a little bit different than the supplemental claim in that you can only choose this appeal option if you've just received your initial decision off your claim, or if it's a decision on your supplemental claim. So it's not an option that you have for every sort of rating decision that you receive. You can't file a higher level review with a higher level review, or with a board decision the same way that you could with the supplemental claim. With higher level review, the record is closed as of the date that you received that previous rating decision, so you don't have the option to submit any additional evidence at that point. So we kind of see that we, in practice, use this lane more often when we just kind of see some legal errors, or maybe VA just missed something on what was already of record, and we just want to kind of point it out to them, spell it out for them, and get a quicker decision. Their average for this, or their goal for these sort of decisions, is still 125 days, and their average for making that decision is still about 4 to 5 months. In theory, you would think it should take less time, and I think in practice we have seen that these do take a little bit less time. Again, just because VA doesn't necessarily have to do all of the background work of obtaining exams or additional medical evidence, and with COVID-19, we know that that has, extended wait times significantly. So I think we do see that we get decisions a little bit faster in the higher level review option, just because it's just straightforward what's already there, and usually just kind of spelling it out as to what VA needs to make a favorable decision.
Okay, so in terms of wait time, so far so good under the new system. VA is pretty much, they're not exactly, but pretty much on target for their projected wait times, which is great. Only a couple months, 4 or 5 months until you get a decision. But you said the other option is to appeal to the board. So Mike, tell us a little bit about what happens when a veteran wants to appeal their initial decision to the Board of Veterans Appeals, and take us down the right side of that infographic.
Sure. So a veteran has essentially 3 options to appeal within this board lane. There is an option for direct review, or the direct review docket, as it's known, the evidence docket, and also the hearing docket. And you can see from the infographic that what's required to file an appeal at the board is what's called a notice of disagreement. This is not to be confused with the notice of disagreement that one would file in the legacy system, but it is really what kicks off the appeal to the board. So in terms of the first option within the board docket, which is the direct review docket, this is an option for veterans who have a claim or would like to appeal to the board, but don't want to submit any additional evidence, and don't want to request a hearing. Under this direct review option, they're not allowed to do either. So, we typically see or use this option if there is a legal issue that we think can be resolved with a legal argument, or we just want somebody that is maybe a little bit more sophisticated to adjudicate the claim. What VA has stated is that their goal within the direct review docket is to decide cases within approximately 1 year. As of fiscal year 2019, they've been way ahead of schedule in terms of their goal, and we've seen from the data we've collected that they've been able to issue decisions in approximately 142 days. But that was fiscal year 2019, and now moving forward, I think it's likely that cases are going to take much longer to be decided within that docket, and that is evidenced by the fact that VA now says publicly that those decisions might take more than a year, even though their stated goal was 1 year. Veterans also have a second option, as I mentioned earlier, when filing a notice of disagreement at the board under AMA. They can choose the evidence docket. And in this lane, veterans can submit additional evidence with their notice of disagreement or within 90 days following the submission of their notice of disagreement. So this is a lane where veterans are, like I said, allowed to submit additional evidence and legal argument to the board, and the board will consider and adjudicate the claim based on that evidence, as well as the rest of the evidence in the record. In terms of stated timeframes for this particular lane, we've seen from our data for fiscal year 2019 that decisions have been issued within approximately 196 days of filing of the notice of disagreement. But now, as I mentioned earlier, VA's website says that decisions within the evidence appeal docket may take more than a year. So again, their stated goal was approximately a year. They're now indicating that that may be a little bit too optimistic. The third and final docket within the board lane is the hearing docket. And as the name suggests, this is a docket for veterans to choose who do in fact want to attend a hearing before a veterans law judge. Evidence is allowed to be submitted at the time of the hearing or within 90 days following the date of the hearing. And so, veterans who want to be heard have a typical hearing as they might in the legacy system have an option under the AMA in the board lane to do so. The wait times, though, in this particular docket, in this particular lane, are much more significant than they are for certainly the direct docket or for even the evidence docket. The data that we've obtained for fiscal year 2019 indicates that decisions are taking approximately 291 days from the filing of the notice of disagreement. VA's website again says that hearings will take more than 1 year. And certainly we've seen in our practice that this board review lane by far is causing the most delay for veterans who seek a fast resolution of their case.
So why does the hearing docket take so long? It's always a question that's bugged me, and Kayla and Mike, you both practice in our veterans law practice. What is it about the hearing docket that causes such delay?
So I would say just, kind of at a basic level, there are a lot of requests for hearings. Veterans typically, at least from my experience, like the idea of a hearing where they can go and plead their case before an individual. And there are very few, or the ability to conduct that many hearings is pretty minimal, particularly during, a time with such as the pandemic that we're going through, where veterans law judges haven't been able to attend as many hearings as they might have previously, and there are further delays that I've seen in my practice after a hearing has even been conducted. It can be months until a hearing transcript is uploaded within the veteran's file. So there are just a number of points where the veteran's case can be further kind of held up, if you will. And I think the demand is great, and the ability to conduct that many hearings is not all that great.
So, as we've noted for fiscal year 2019, VA was either on target or ahead of schedule in terms of getting these cases decided. But I think the three of us definitely agree that we don't think these numbers are going to stay the same. And VA is now, in fact, reporting further delays in terms of getting these decisions decided, either in any of the dockets at the board, and we think there might be a couple reasons as to why these delays are going to pick up. So, Kayla, what are some things that we've noticed in our practice and things we're thinking about why the AMA decision rate might start slowing down?
Good question. So I think, one that we've talked about a few times already is related to the pandemic. So it does take VA a little bit more time to get some of that evidence that might be needed to substantiate some of these claims. Scheduling exams for veterans has become increasingly difficult, especially depending on the types of exams that are required for them to make a decision on the claims or on the appeals. Hearings are taking longer to get scheduled. So that definitely is causing some holdup and adding to the wait times. We're also seeing that there's a number of claims related to the Blue Water Vietnam veteran cases that are coming through. So under Procopio, that was decided on a couple years ago. There was a stay that was lifted on all of those decisions starting in January of 2020. So a lot of the ones that had just kind of been sitting there for several years are now working their way through the appellate process. And veterans are also starting to file more claims in relation to this now that they have the option to under the law. So I think we're seeing an influx in those sorts of cases. And we're also seeing a lot of people choosing to move into the Appeals Modernization Act system instead of legacy. So when a statement of the case is issued or a supplemental statement of the case is issued, if you're within the necessary time frame to appeal those decisions, so 60 days for the statement of the case or 30 days from the supplemental statement of the case, you do have the option to opt your appeal into the Appeals Modernization System. If it's something that you would like to do. And I think we are seeing an increasing number of veterans and representatives doing that. Because we do see some of those shorter wait times, we do have a little bit more control over what's going on and what we can submit. And it does allow for a few more options as far as what we're able to do with the claim. So I think that there's a number of different reasons why things do get held up and we are seeing longer wait times, but I think those are three of the bigger ones. What we're able to.
So Mike, do you have any sort of closing thoughts or tips for folks out there who are picking options, figuring out what system they're in, what to expect in the process, number one top question, how long is this going to take? Picking options.
Yeah, and that's always a difficult question because things are changing rapidly, as we've discussed, and the numbers that we've seen in fiscal year 2019 are likely not going to be anywhere near the numbers that we see for fiscal year 2020. But I would say it's really important for veterans to always examine their decision or their claim, when they're filing or when they receive a decision, to make sure that they are in either AMA or legacy and that they know which system they're in, because these systems as of right now are operating and sometimes they're operating together and sometimes they don't always operate smoothly together. And so there is, the ability for veterans to have multiple claims, multiple appeals pending in their case, and have some of those appeals pending in the old legacy system and have some of the appeals and claims pending in the new appeals modernization system. And it's really important to be able to keep track of which is which, because the appellate rights and options differ depending on the system that the veteran's in for that particular appeal or claim. And there are some disadvantages and some advantages to being in either system. So I think being able to keep track of that, particularly for veterans who have multiple claims and appeals pending, is something that they'll want to make sure that they're doing.
And I think that's a great point, because one of the hiccups that I've seen with our clients and in our practice, folks coming to us for help, are people who have filed the wrong form. So keep in mind that, VA loves their forms. You have to file everything on a form now. You can no longer file that claim on, the cocktail napkin saying, I want benefits for X. You need to use VA's form. And there are forms for the legacy system and there are forms for the AMA system, and they are not interchangeable. So make sure that you reach out to your accredited rep, make sure that you reach out to your VSO, your attorney, whoever it is that you're working with on the claim, to make sure you're using the right form for the right system, because that can be a really unfortunate and shocking surprise when you get notice back from VA saying, you've missed your appeal deadline, this is not the right form. Kayla, do you have any thoughts or tips in closing for people out there who are listening to our broadcast today, saying, you've missed your...
Yeah, I think, like you said, there's a lot of different options. There's a lot of different forms. It can be really confusing, especially because it is a newer system. We're seeing, a lot of issues in our practice with VA, even properly taking the forms that are correct. So if you're not sure if, something is wrong or right, I definitely encourage, anyone to reach out to a VSO or an attorney or an accredited representative to help them with their case and to kind of guide them through the process and making sure that all of the correct forms are being submitted in the correct timeframes. And if something is messed up either on, the appellate side or on, VA side, to make sure that those issues are corrected within a timely manner before VA kind of decides that the claim is no longer in standing. So just, as a reminder, you should always reach out for help and ask questions if it is necessary.
Great. Well, thank you so much to everyone out there for joining us for our discussion about the VA disability claims and appeals process timeline. Once again, I'm Emma Peterson, and I'm with Kayla D'Onofrio and Mike Lestrito. And please feel free to reach out to us in the comments. We will try to respond. Give us a call or check out our website at cck-law.com for all these infographics and more information about the AMA and legacy appeals process. But with that, we will say good afternoon.